So Bogdan was saying, I like to separate deploy and releases processes. Deploy should be, yeah, deploy should be automated. Okay. So machine is responsible for this. The only step when engineering is involved is to press the button deploy. Business decide what and when functionality should be released. What is your point of view on this?
Yeah, that is exactly also what I see, that many teams or many companies do not differentiate with that. I deploy, it's going live, it affects customers, and that could be an issue. But when we introduce feature toggles, for example, like Wodan also points at, we can deploy a lot of things without even putting them live. And we can even put them live only for a small group of users, or we can put them live only for one tenant in a multi-tenant environment. And by this, we can control who gets it first, and we might be able to even test it in production. And then we know it works in production, because we can have a test tenant, for example, where we activate a feature and we can run automated tests there. And we know that it also works in the production infrastructure, not just on some staging system with smaller data, less traffic and all these things. So this is very helpful. And then also that provides the capability to business to activate features for everybody once they are ready. And we can also quickly deactivate them if there is an incident, because when in deployment, like when the release goes wrong and we see, okay, there is an incident, then what are we doing? We can fix forward if we have a fast pipeline, but even easier, we can just deactivate that one feature in most cases. And then within seconds, we are back at the green state and everything runs fine for everybody.
What is actually well-being then for software professionals? So why are we going to talk about that? Richard, can you take the word and talk a little bit about your experience and why this is a big topic we should all take care of?
Yeah, so I think interestingly for me, I've always been physically active. So well-being used to mean to me just physical health, right? And so I've always thought, yeah, I've got that down. I've always gone to the gym. I've played football. I've played squash. I've done running. So that's always been something that's there. And actually, only later in my career did I realize how much that was helping me along the way. But I wasn't doing it deliberately. I wasn't doing it for that purpose. And I hadn't connected the dots. Reflecting more on my career and some of my challenges and trying to piece it all together, and thinking a bit more about the mindset, about mental health and all of that kind of stuff, I realized well-being is much broader than just your physical health. And I think one of the biggest and most interesting things about well-being is that it's very individualistic. And so that is, it's good and it's bad in a sense, because the fact that it's so individualistic means that we can't just put a single label on it. So we can't say to everyone, this is well-being and you've got it or you don't. And so for some people that's hard and it's complicated. On the flip side, it's actually really good for us, because well-being means different things to different people, and we decide what being means to us. And that's super important, and it touches, it's very closely linked to a big part of what we're talking about here, which is responsibility. And almost the first part of our responsibility is to define and to recognize what being means to us. And so just broad stroke, that's your physical health, your mental health, feeling safe in the environment that you find yourself in, and feeling safe being social with people as well. And yeah, that's a broad thing, and those different things mean different things to different people, and it's finding your mix of those and then branching out to the things that contribute positively to them, which can also be completely different for different people. So suddenly everything's thrown legs, and it's huge.
This is not a clip anymore. This is now live.
Are you sure?
I think so.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. How is everyone doing? So, we are here today to talk about the topic of PWAs again, because it's actually there's quite good response, a lot actually on LinkedIn, a lot everywhere actually. People are talking about that topic, thinking about that topic, and what was often the topic was how is it actually in comparison to other alternatives. So we have mentioned in the last show a lot like the traditional native approaches with Kotlin, Xcode, these kind of things. So going really native. And those are not the only, let's say, I wouldn't say viable options, because I don't think that they are actually big viable options anymore, because they are very low level, they are very native. And if we want to create something which creates value, we need to have some speed ups, especially in smaller to medium-sized, even smaller businesses and startups. And alternatives like Flutter and React Native are there as well. We've touched them, but not very deeply. The reason for that was we both never worked in those environments. So this is very important today to get some help of the audience, of you, helping us navigating this topic. But the entire topic today will be, let's say, aligned with my last article from Sunday, which is about that exact topic. It is about the comparison between PWA, so the web stack, the current capabilities, Flutter and React Native. And that will be the main topic for today, talking a little bit about use cases, how would we decide, how would we, let's say, if we would pick a specific context, so we will play a little bit around with context today, and then I would ask, for example, then Dennis, how would you decide for this specific context? So, for example, a pure native context, a mixed context where we need to have several apps, but we only have 5 people in a team. Those, let's say, those contexts which are actually interesting to make decisions. And I don't mean the contexts where you have unlimited amount of resources, unlimited amount of money, a government in between, behind that who's giving you 3 years of time. This is not what we mean as a context. So real context where most of you in the audience are actually part of. This is topic for today. Have I missed something so far?
I think that covers it well. I think we should mention how the combination of Flutter, React Native, and PWA interacts. Like, what are the crossovers, or sort of what are the alternatives? What are the opposing forces here? What forces are even at play here, and who this decision really is for. I think that's really important, because a developer won't just randomly go work for a company and say, I'm a Flutter developer, but this React Native thing looks good. I'm just gonna, relearn my entire stack and change our entire pipeline just to, do an experiment. I don't think that's a sort of viable decision-making space for an individual. These are architectural decisions. These are large, long-term business decisions, right? So this is very strategic, right? So this is in no way communicating to Flutter developers that they need to forget everything they know about Flutter and need to change. And it's in no way talking to React or React Native developers, telling them that their stack is not good and that they need to go learn Flutter or PWAs. This is about complementing what you already know, plus giving you a roadmap in case you headed down the wrong direction, to sort of have some kind of alternative cost or sunk cost sort of stop loss or limit to your let's say bad decision if you encountered one, or if you realize that what you decided for strategically a few years ago isn't working out for you anymore.
Yeah. So let's dive in directly. So when we think of you mentioned you have a team of Flutter developers. You have them. You have 5 of them. They're experienced. They already built something in Flutter. Would you? So basically, Flutter is a variable. You could, exchange it with everything else out there.
Just for
so
context, I've never worked with Flutter. I have coached teams that had a Flutter ARM outsourced,
Mm-hmm.
augmented to their development org, to their engineering org. Personally, however, I was in the sort of pioneering leg of Objective-C and iOS development when it came out. So that's sort of my hands-on experience. And we did do a few like crazy little apps and ideas early on when it was really super sexy and really easy to sort of get into the whole ecosystem.
Okay.
That's sort of my background here, sort of what I have sort of hands-on experience with, because otherwise we can go very broad and be theoretical. But I do find it important that we sort of draw the line, like when we're speculating and when we're actually speaking from experience.
Yeah. So would you tell a team or make a decision that a team which is familiar with Flutter but not with, for example, PWAs or React Native, to switch to another technology, or wouldn't you do this? So what is your general opinion about those specializations of teams? Would you make changes or force people to change when the business aspect would say that's actually a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that's tactically a good idea as well?
I mean, I would never, the differentiating factor, and I'm curious about what you think about this as well. The differentiating factor for me is, is the team already hired? Is the team long-term? Is the team a group of freelancers, or is the team sort of a group of permanent employees that are actually a strong cohesive unit? If they're a strong cohesive unit, I would let them make the decision. I mean, I would include them in every step of the decision, right? To see if there's somebody within the team who is strong. Somebody might have an overlap with one of the stacks. Are they capable of leading such an initiative? Are they capable of inspiring one? If not, am I able to do that? Will I have the strategic and tactical time available to do that, to sort of be that role model with the team? Because maybe I don't understand our context either. And then down the line, the really important decision is why.
Mm-hmm.
If change is necessary, why? Like, what's in it for the business? If that from the get-go is very hard to articulate, my default answer would be no.
Mm-hmm.
But again, context matters, right? So if it's a augmented team where it's a group of freelancers sort of on a 3-month contract, I wouldn't even bat an eyelash. I would happily sort of do an experiment.
Yeah. So I think I would go in the same direction and would say that let's say the underlying skill set and culture is much depending on the experiences the team had together so far. And part of that culture as well is what you actually did. So in particular, and if you would have worked with Flutter for years, it's probably something which is part of your, or became part of your DNA. So unlearn it and learn something different is maybe not the best choice you can do, no matter if the business case is right or not. So and the other part is, if you change an entire team to work on something entirely different, it might make sense to just spin up a new team maybe, and try to make this as a new business opportunity. I just wanted to ask that question because it's actually questions many companies ask themselves when they think about new business opportunities, and they think that the current stack isn't viable anymore. But actually, it's a little bit more vice. No, it's actually not. It's like oftentimes teams who had some developers in Android, some developers in iOS, and they want to switch to something more cross-platform. If they want to make the leap or not, and developers oftentimes don't really want to, and they say why, but we could do this. But the business aspect is to have this cross-platform idea behind that, the one code base thing,
That situation I found myself often in, because I've often worked with startups who have had usually some kind of web presence, and then initially an iOS presence, and then later on an Android presence. Usually it was that order. Especially with Silicon Valley funded startups, that is usually the default order: web, iOS, and Android. Mileage might vary. If you're a specifically mobile audience targeting company, you might go iOS and then web and then Android. But usually it's like this cadence. unless you get like ridiculous funding and then you do all of them at the same time, which comes with its own problems. From a tactical level, because I do coach like these transition, not like I think I coach often the pre-transition area, and then as they go through the sort of first wave, the first quarter, first 2 quarters, and personally, I found this something similar happening in First Blood when I was working for First Blood Technologies. But it was a different shift. It wasn't Android and Android and iOS or native and Flutter, but it was React to Angular, right? So it was a few front-end developers who joined the team who were previously React developers who then switched over to Angular. And I saw the mental shift that is quite common in these sort of mobile ecosystem shifts when it comes to developer stack changes, that somebody coming from an old stack will still be thinking in their old stack when they're adopting a new technology. So you will often find like clumsy solutions where a previously React developer would be thinking, okay, how would I do this in React? Okay, what is the equivalent in Angular? And some of these do not have overlapping solutions, right? So somebody going from Flutter to React Native might ask themselves the question, okay, to be correct architecturally, I have to do it this and this way in Flutter. How can I do the same thing in React Native? And perhaps the answer, the equivalent of that, is actually something very unnatural and very unorganic, or just not mainstream in that ecosystem. And there will be a lot of such inconsistencies in execution during such transition points. So it's really important that you're aware of it, because ideally this is a sort of junior to lower senior level problem, because ideally your architecture that you're replacing, that you're sort of augmenting, should be speaking the language of the business. If that is not present and it's just a bunch of components talking to each other, then there is a sort of anemic property, an anemic quality to the application, where it is way too close to the framework. So going from one framework to the other, trying to sort of translate that language, that never goes well. That is always a very tricky sort of almost no-win scenario. Generally, I would spin up a new team if I was given that context, or augment the old team by having micro front ends or a completely separate app. Because the biggest issue is that if I ask the team, how do we make this continuously integrated and backward compatible? If the answer is we can't, then if we can't and it takes more than a week, then it's a hell no from me. That would be sort of my main metric there. Again, if we never made it to market and if we're just doing a last minute course correction on the framework, sure, throw it all away and restart, no problem. But context matters, and when you're transitioning, generally backward compatibility is a very, very much desired quality. So if you're doing it side by side, if you're doing it micro front ends or with microservices, that would be my recommended approach. If that is not possible, I would just rebrand the app, have a version 2 app or a new app or a redesign. Have a business reason tied together with the actual infrastructure change. If there's no business reason, it's probably done for the wrong reasons.
Good. So in general, I would say we're going directly into the topic now of doing some comparison between those things. And doing it high level and going down the vertical is, I think, a good idea from the standpoint to get an overview where we are. And I would do a screen share for that.
Yeah, you wrote an article.
It is the article. I will post it on LinkedIn actually. So if someone
is it paywalled?
No, it's not. I think this is not. No. The Sunday versions are normally not paywalled in the very beginning. So I just posted it, and here is the stream. So actually the screen stream.
For those of you live in the audience, if you have any Flutter specific questions, mobile development specific questions, PWA specific questions, do drop them in chat, even if we're talking about something else. We will make pauses every now and then to sort of course correct based on your commentary and based on your questions, because this is meant to be an audience-driven conversation, and I can see that there's quite a few of you on all of our platforms. There's a handful of people on LinkedIn, a handful of people on YouTube, and a few regulars watching in on Twitch.
Good. So what we see here is a matrix. And first of all, I think the last one I was already, so the left-hand side was already shown. So what are actually a progressive web apps specifications, or let's say pros and cons, or actually only pros listed here. So that we actually have a PWA works offline, it's installable on a device, it's feature rich, it's app store ready, and it's fast, like a native app, and it's shareable, it's cross-platform, and cost-effective like a website is. And this is something we need to consider. A website is cross-platform like no other thing, because on every device you does have a web browser. And which makes a website very cross-platform, even more than you would actually think of things like from Flutter, where you actually have a, let's say, an exported version, a transpiled version into the specific device. But it is not like that you have it in a way like the browser is natively working on all those devices, which makes the PWA actually a very good cross-platform fit in general. So let's take a look at the matrix. So in the vertical, we have features and performance accumulated, and on the horizontal, we have discoverability and cost effectiveness. And the reason for that is it is actually we can have two diagrams in one here, and we have additionally to that, and this is in my opinion very important, this green line, which is in the screen, maybe not very, let's say, very good visible, but it is actually the part of the average small business and startup requirements, which means that we have this line here. Is it actually visible?
We can't see your cursor.
Okay. Okay, never mind. So this is actually the interesting point. So let's take a look at the traditional things, which are the native apps and the traditional websites. So the traditional website is extremely cost efficient to create because you just have one website to do. It's very discoverable. It is you find very easily people who can work on it. Websites were long before native apps on mobile devices at least were available. And this is the reason why it's very cost effective. The problem with traditional web apps and the way how they actually treat it is they are not very performant and they are not very, let's say, feature heavy. The point is they are not meant to be like a PWA is, which is the reason why the PWA is a little higher, and I come to that a little later why it's only a little higher. But the native apps, on the other hand, they are way high in that vertical because you basically can do everything the native device is capable of do in a native app. But it's pretty hard to discover it, and it's not very cost efficient. Actually, it's not cost efficient at all, because if you do it natively in the very native way, you need to do that for a specific device, which can be iOS, Android, or even Windows in this case. And this is very cost inefficient, especially if you have only the budget for 5 to 6, 7 developers or less. Then it is actually stressing you quite a lot to get everything done right. And this is the point about it. It's about getting things right. It's you have a specific time frame where you have a specific budget for, and you need to make sure that you get your things out. And basically you build the same thing, the same requirements in different code bases. This is the very native way of doing things. And this is when I ask several companies in the past, or they told me, we have this, the iOS version is very far, but the Android version isn't, and we don't have a web version yet, which is actually some form of, let's say, less feature-rich version of the native apps. And that was always very strange to see. So they actually had 3 versions of that, sometimes only 2, so no web version. And that was basically the native approach. So it's very performant, feature-rich, but definitely not cost-effective. And it is not very discoverable. People say, yeah, but being discoverable, being on the App Store is, you find it very easy. Actually, you don't. you already know that an app is available on the App Store. So the App Store is just a vehicle to get the app. But it's not like you're browsing the app stores all day long for new apps. Sometimes people do that for games, or if they try to find a to-do app or something like this. But it's not like that you go randomly in browsing the web store all day long. Sorry, the app store all day long. What you do instead is you spend quite a lot of time on normal websites where you have ads, on Google where you have listings, where you have search results, ads as well. And there, placing your direct app there makes it actually quite discoverable, which is the big strength of a website actually. And the PWA now is on the right-hand side because it actually incorporates the very same technologies like traditional web apps are doing, because it's actually a website. So it does have the full capabilities of that as well. So it is on the cost-effective side because you only have one code base if you want to create a full PWA. So just what I said about the native apps is the same for PWA, just that you only do it in one app, and you can then have basically your native app, so not really your native, but an app on all the devices, and you can use it natively with a PWA already as well. This is what you can do. The problem with that is it is not as performant, as feature rich as it could be with native apps. There are some, let's say, there's light at the end of the tunnel, because first of all, the web is getting better. The features are getting, let's say, more sophisticated. We have way more capabilities than we had the last year. So every year we get more capabilities, especially on Apple devices. But more interestingly, we have things like, we talked about that last show as well. We have things like WebAssemblies. When we take a look, this is in the article as well. When I quickly zoom out and go down a little bit more, then we have, where we do here, the Canva example. I make it a little larger. This is basically Canva. Most of you should have heard of that. I use it basically daily. And I just open it. And first of all, we see a service worker running. There was an update waiting to be installed, which means that next time I reload the page, the update would be installed. But yet there is no offline capability. So it is not really a full spec PWA, but except the offline capabilities, everything else would fit into the specifications of a PWA. But what we see here, and the point about why Canva is so interesting, is it does all the graphics stuff, video animations, and all this kind of stuff in a browser. And we just said that PWAs are actually not capable of doing those high performance things. And that's true. If you would try to do that with a, let's say with just a browser, you would be able to do a lot of that, which Canva is actually capable of, but only on very, very good hardware devices. Definitely not on mediocre devices or even cheap devices. It wouldn't simply not be possible right now with the current technologies because it's too much emulated still. It will change in the web specifications, especially when we go into more, let's say, graphic driver things capable of addressing via JavaScript and all this kind of stuff. Canva itself, so the Canva element is a way towards that, the 3D elements, WebGL and all this kind of stuff. But the point about this is actually something different. And this is the WebAssembly. So WASM. So I don't actually call it, it's called WASM or WASM. I don't know, but I call it WASM now.
I also call it WASM or WebAssembly. WASM
okay, so
didn't
WASM. Let's get on WASM now. Let's just agree on WebAssembly then, because it's more descriptive. And everything inside the editor is actually a WebAssembly thing. And this in combination with the PWA specifications, so you can even cache WebAssemblies for offline mode, makes the browser then capable again, which means that in reality, when we take a look at this, and this came in hindsight when I wasn't drawing that, so I need to update it. Actually, with with WebAssemblies together, we can say that in terms of performance, the PWA is near to keep up with native apps. And at least with Flutter and React Native. This is an interesting point. This does not count for the basic web technologies. I can display it there later. I have a little app prepared. Actually, it's a private app I have built once, where I have some where I can, for example, load into a 4 megabyte image, and then we take a look how the app reacts on that when we want to downsample it while still using the app. So this is a stress test for an app, and I can display it a little later if you like. So let us leave us a comment if it's interesting for you to see something like that.
We already have a comment. Is now a good time to jump in?
Yeah, maybe I quickly finish with
Sure.
the general description. And then we have React. Then we have Flutter and React Native. They are very close to each other when it comes to those things, yet they have differences. Those differences are described in the article in detail, how I understood them, how I researched them, and how I would. So the article is basically about how I, as a CTO, would make decisions for a tech stack. So take a look at that. This is actually the result I had made several years ago already, and it's still viable, and I put it into a document. So React Native and Flutter are close, very close to native. They are not exactly like native apps in form of performance. Features, we could say they are, because they are actually running on native. But in terms of cost effectiveness and discoverability, they still lag behind the PWA. And now let's quickly come to the green line. And this is actually something very new in this diagram, because I have this diagram already for some years. It is about the average requirements, which means that it is like Flutter is faster than the PWA, way faster. It is performing better. You can basically do it. You can do even hardcore things like in it with like hard graphic stuff or something like that. The point is, do you need that? And this is the question this diagram shall help to solve. It is about what do you actually need. And when I talk with companies, and I talk with a lot of companies about their problems, about the tech stacks, it is all the same every time, that the requirements are often mixed up with possibilities and capabilities. So people say, oh, we can do that in a very good way. We can, let's create a very, graphically let's say complicated UI just to impress the user. Let's have very good performance just to impress everyone with performance. The point is, we tend to have like that, like we want to have fast cars, or actually I don't want to have fast cars anymore, but this is a different topic. So it is a little bit like that. So humans tend, especially when we are in the ego phase, in the amateur phase, in the personal phase, we try to do things as good as possible. But in reality, we have requirements, which means that if we build a product, we have a specific amount of money, we have a specific skill set, we have a specific team and a context. And this defines the actual requirements. So most companies does have requirements in performance way lower than what Flutter, React Native, or native apps can actually do. And the same is with cost effectiveness. So cost effectiveness, on the other hand, is actually most companies cannot afford React Native, Flutter, or native apps, but they actually do because they think they need to have the performance. But they have never made the real assumptions if they really need the performance or not, or what modern PWAs can do. And then comes the next problem is, the problem is that PWAs and the web is not really made for being very performant, but it can be if you know how. So if you go the traditional route, your website is not meant to be a very performant UI. It is not created like that. So if you create things differently, if you leverage asynchronous good, if you use caching on a good way, if you leverage web workers and service workers in the right way, you can improve that to a level that it actually fits the requirements of most companies I know. This is actually the reason why we're talking about 2 weeks about this idea, because most companies I've worked with realized very late in their process that they actually could have done everything in a PWA and they would be already finished with everything. Instead, they stuck in between the worlds to create several code bases for the very exact same thing. This is something I just wanted to mention today, which is maybe an interesting point for you. If you have any more questions about this diagram or matrix, please let us know in the comments. But now we should go into some, answering things. Right.
So
go ahead.
So we got a question from our most prominent LinkedIn user.
Hello, LinkedIn user. How are you there?
Hey, Thomas. So his comment is a bit cut off. I'll read it directly from LinkedIn. He mentions, I was also on the path to choose for the right ecosystems. I also asked myself the question, what is the best one, especially cross-platform? My advice is not to ask yourself if you should switch to something because it is cross-platform. Every time when you're cross-platform, you have some problems when you go outside of the very default standard. Also, with the default standard for the platform, I'm assuming, you have some disadvantages. Choose the ecosystem and not the language or the framework. I found a way for myself, he says. Take the ecosystem for your core benefit / feature in the future. So it connects with what you just mentioned regarding, do you even need what the platform provides natively? And Raul has a second follow-up on this. Hey Raul, even users have no exact idea what they want most of the time. We are there to help them solve their problems. No need to brag, but to providing something that is useful and solves the problem properly. And I think we're sort of beating around the bush about the same core idea, in that most companies, especially small medium businesses that have a data product, a SaaS product, a service product, or a productivity product, which outside of e-commerce really covers 90% of all businesses, at least here in Europe and the US. They are not in the business of building apps. They are in the business of either serving direct to customer services, or providing some kind of B2B infrastructure, usually a data pipeline of some kind. And such businesses have generally a primary platform, which is usually the web. There are some exceptions. Now, I'm excluding here e-commerce sites, which might be headless or running on a proprietary platform. Shopify is a good example. Or entertainment businesses that are basically hardware accelerated and running locally on one device in particular, and then you sort of port it to the secondary one. That's usually how these go. So most businesses are not in the business of developing and selling an app. A good example, here's a good example that sort of touches every software developer. Slack. Slack is primarily a chat service, and you don't go into the app store saying, hey, I want to pay for the Slack app. That's nonsense. You're paying for a Slack workspace because it's a SaaS service in the cloud. And by virtue of, if you're on the desktop primarily, it will run either on the app or in your browser. And the two of them are basically equivalent. But you would never go to the extent of saying, oh, I'm gonna pay for the premium app for iPhone because it's so much better than using it on my desktop machine. You just expect it to be there, even if it's just the same thing as you have in your browser, just to be able to be mobile, right? So it's not that Slack needs to have a mobile browser because their value proposition requires it, but it's a productivity tool. And when it comes to interacting with humans or having data pipelines available to them, which people need for decision making, the market, the users expect the app to be there. The users expect there to be a mobile-friendly version of the service. Whether it's in the browser, whether it's in a fake browser, whether it's a native experience or PWA, or like hardcore native application that was handcrafted or not ported from the web. But the point is that the requirements are never I, naive Bob, want a very fluid native iOS experience. Because if you open up Gmail on the iPhone, for example, it is not a native iOS experience, right? It looks nothing like an iOS app. It looks like Gmail, right? So they find it really important to make sure that Gmail on the iPhone looks like Gmail. And it doesn't look like any other iOS app, and it actually doesn't follow the standard. Because they have their look and feel, and they want to follow that. Same thing with Instagram, same thing with Facebook. LinkedIn is somewhere in the middle, which I think is why performance-wise it really sucks. It sort of doesn't really understand where it is. And then you have all the other PWAs, Spotify, Facebook Messenger. Apps with very good native experiences are, let's say, games and apps like Duolingo, productivity tools that benefit from having like a really strong native presence because there might be integration with some other tools. Or, for example, I have the Aura tool. It doesn't look like a native app. It's the ring that I'm wearing constantly, right? So it's measuring my activity. But it does take advantage of native features like the bottom bar to slide tabs on iOS. And on Android, it looks different. And Android, it uses a different toolbar to manage activities and primary pages, primary screens. Sorry. Right. So coming back to the core idea is that you're not in the business of building apps generally. You're building an app to complement something you're already offering because your users naturally expect a mobile-friendly version of your service.
Yeah.
Right? So it will not be profitable. It will not be a standalone product that you can sell on the App Store. You don't even want it to distribute through the App Store. You want it to distribute it through your already existing web service. And you probably aren't being discovered through the App Store. Right? So nobody signs up to Jira by going to the App Store and installing Jira on their phone and going, oh, wow, this is really cool. I'm going to show this to my team.
Yesterday I saw a video from Theo, and the YouTuber and streamer, and he was talking about a similar topic about web apps and apps, and why web apps are actually, since COVID, very interesting, because he showed some diagrams of app usage who does have a smartphone, and it's actually quite a lot. I remember it was 90% of the world's population does have a smartphone. Okay, but it's but and
even apps, the most impoverished, poor, sort of lower class, or even endangered social strata has access to mobile phones even before food, right? So it's much more likely that you have access to a smartphone than clean water or food, which is mind-boggling.
But that you had the point is that the number of downloads in App Store in the app stores went up until COVID, and then suddenly it stagnated, and the usage of apps at all was native apps in this case was degrading as well. But what we have seen is a huge push in the SaaS area, because we had this, everyone wanted to do digital things now, and we had things like everywhere, but basically everywhere we had new SaaS products, and people were basically startups, and startups, most likely, we saw the metrics, won't have the budget to do everything. And there was this PWA thing, or let's say web capabilities. So many of those apps are actually no PWAs in full specification, but let's be grateful here today. Let's call them PWAs as well, because they just don't have offline capabilities. But this is middle ground. But the point is that web apps were going up, apps were going to stagnate, and I think there was a relation, and this is what Theo was actually talking about. And I find this a very interesting topic, and because we said, is it the year? I will.
I'll find it. Is it on his YouTube, Theo GG?
Yeah, maybe I take a look at my history later on a little bit, and then I post it.
The channel is called TOT3GG. If you don't know it, Theo used to work as an engineer for Twitch. He worked on the studio on the back end. If you know Twitch, like Theo is a software engineer who also streams, and he worked on the studio and on a lot of the dashboards on the Twitch sort of user interface on the back office. And he has since left to create an open source platform upon which he built his online SaaS business, where you can sort of stream and chat and sort of have a sort of in-browser experience that would be, let's say, very close to OBS, like close to what you would consider OBS to provide, to have a sort of native experience of that as a semi-PWA in the browser. I think that's his primary business. And he's also prominently pushing that stack, which he calls the T3 stack, right? So it is this sort of native backend and frontend merge of having a full stack type-safe TypeScript environment, where the backend and the frontend are the same. How would you call that? Are the same development environment. They're the same development pipeline. So there isn't a separate backend pipeline and a frontend pipeline, which is super. It's very meta, it's very, very much beyond the curve, new and bleeding edge. So if you're into that kind of thing, I would definitely recommend you check out Theo's videos. And while you're following up on your next point, I will go find the video I mentioned.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I found it or not, because I'm looking for a specific, because I can't listen to it right now. So let me take a look. I will definitely post it later on. It's a very interesting channel, by the way, especially if you like Tailwind and React. And another point. Okay, I just, what I share here for quite a while is, I wanted to give some examples. What is actually PWA on the left-hand side? In the middle part, it's Flutter. On the right-hand side is React Native. And interesting part is you have both sometimes in areas, for example, Airbnb does have both versions of React Native and the React version. Both are very similar and they are both used. Spotify, for example, is used in a PWA. I wrote inside this document as well about the success of Spotify and why Spotify PWA was creating more leads and revenue for Spotify other than the hidden app. And I want to quickly explain that. It is about discoverability. So if, imagine you have a Spotify, something similar, take Deezer, I don't know. And you copy a link, you share a link. And to open the link, you need to download an app from the App Store. So maybe you need a password, you don't have your password at the moment, you need to download it, maybe you don't have space on your device, all those problems at the moment. And then you download it and you don't know why it takes so long to download, then it installs and you don't have time, you want to go on. Of course, you have it downloaded then, you have an app on your home screen, which is good, but the way to actually get to what you want to have in the world where we tend to spend less time on things is actually degrading. So it is basically not a good fit anymore to use the app for this case. The PWA was the fully fledged version of what the native app capabilities could do. So the same again with the requirements. But you could just open the link and listen to the music. Not offline. You needed to pay for the PWA, for premium, in order to make the app offline capable. But so that the music is actually downloading into your IndexedDB and then played, which is good. You can do that, no problem. But the point is, people can share instantly and listen instantly. This is real discoverability. So it's basically instance there on every platform. You can do that on iPhone. You can do that even probably on some watches these days. Yeah, probably. You can do that even on your Tesla. You can do that everywhere without installing something. You don't need to care if you ever actually have. You can even do that on older Windows machines, which does not have a Windows store. And this is great. This is actually what I just wanted to say. And Spotify is listed there as well. Of course, there are versions as well, because Spotify is a large company. They have multiple code bases. They don't lack the problem. So they don't lack budget or people to create multiple code bases. But imagine that most people who are listening to us, who are on LinkedIn, are not in that advantageous situation. So this is not a great situation where we are in. We have all limitations everywhere, and we need to think twice about the requirements. And this is what I wanted to say. Most applications can already be done by a PWA. And just take a look. We have Twitter, we have Forbes, Starbucks, Uber, Telegram. Even Telegram is basically a packed version of a PWA. Pinterest, Airbnb, StreamYard. I think there was a version of Instagram as well, but they moved it to React Native again because it's a large company, they can do it. But Instagram, and I remember Airbnb as well. Airbnb started with a web version and then they moved to React Native as well. So large companies tend to have both worlds. But interestingly, React and React Native, they don't switch too much into the realm of Flutter. This is something I saw as well. So you have Flutter is pretty new in comparison to React Native, but React is simply, let's be honest, it's industry standard already. So if you use it on the web or you use it on React Native in the native world, it is basically a standard, and you'll find a very good ecosystem and resources there everywhere, basically. And you can switch code parts between both worlds if you do it right, which is
if you do it right, which is really the proof in the pudding. I found I found a link from Theo's website. I'm not sure if it's the video you meant, but it is the closest one that discusses React Native and alternatives. And Theo is also a very big Expo fan. Expo framework is a sort of framework that is trying to get away from the mainstream frameworks that also very easily transitions into creating PWAs and native web apps. Hello, Grant.
Grant, hello.
Lovely to have you with us.
Grant, you are late today. That's not okay. Happy to see you.
We have a question from Sabrina. Sabrina mentions, would you say that in the case of starting from scratch, we should always consider PWA and only discard it if we need the core functionality we cannot cover with this?
Yes. It's actually one of my points in the article. I actually pointed that out, and it was in the LinkedIn article as well. Not in a LinkedIn post I was posting on Monday, I think. And I said, I go into the race with the idea in mind that I need a PWA. And if I come to a specific point where I can't meet requirements anymore, I take a look for something different. And the reason for that is, so why I am so blindly looking just at PWA is because PWA is available by default on all devices. And we don't even need to install most of the apps we use. I haven't installed StreamYard, for example.
Of which are we supporting, which are we not supporting. You don't have to selectively support platforms, but rather you come up with a benign, let's say, benignly generic version, and then you customize if needed. That has its own problems, but I think nowadays it is an acceptable trade-off.
Yeah. So, for example, I have on my phone, I have my browser open, and I use Chrome on my phone, and it does have these tabs, those large tabs, and it's quite interesting. I use most of the apps I use are actually in the browser, and I wasn't doing that on purpose or something like that. And the apps I can't use in the browser, I of course use as an app. For example, LinkedIn, but StreamYard. I have one or two mail programs I don't use next to Outlook. Then they are basically those I have in my browser as well. I use my blog in the browser. I use
Gmail,
so many things.
Gmail is probably one of the most prominently.
Mentor Cruise I use in the browser as well entirely, right?
Yeah,
and
Mentor Cruise, Gmail, Discord,
Canva sometimes. So if I'm mobile, I use it sometimes. Mobile just, and it's simply working. So there is not really a point where I could say, yeah, but you need to have it natively. So when we started back with Rayon, the CEO told me that we need to get into the app stores because people expect it. But then we took a closer look, and most people weren't expecting that anymore. It was in the past, but it isn't today, because there was basically no apps in the past on the browser. So
You're meant
let's
to go into the website, have a QR code, detect your device, and then click that, and then sort of install something on your app. It doesn't necessarily have to go to the App Store.
exactly. And so the expectations changed, the requirements changed, and the capabilities of the web, which is everywhere accessible and available, changed as well. They got better. So we have good cost efficiency and a good capability, which is enough and decent to actually meet the requirements.
So I see this craze a lot with sort of shadow patterns, where, you know, for example, commercial airlines have this sort of pattern to customer retention, where they will sell you a plane ticket, you buy it in a browser, but then there's something silly in the process where they say, install the app to have the boarding pass directly in your phone, in your phone's wallet, right? So you can have it full screen on the on the startup menu. But then they send you notifications, they send you upsells, they advertise to you, they encourage you to purchase the next ticket from within the phone. Then it's a terrible experience because it's just a browser, or it might not have the full functionality of the browser. And God forbid that you can buy the tickets, but then certain customizations you have to do in the browser, or you can't do, you know, lost packages in the phone. You know, like the phone is just basically like a link tree, and then when you click anything, it puts it to the browser. Right. So there are a few cases like this where there are shadow patterns being used to entrap a user, right? Where there's this idea that if we have a sexy app rather than just a link, then you will, for some reason, sort of think more highly of us. But you can get the icon onto the user's desktop, onto the user's iPhone, by using a PWA. You don't have to go through that sort of fake glamorous process of having some kind of like weird app approved. And God forbid, then it won't even be approved because it's using a whole bunch of shadow patterns, you know, at least in the case of iOS. You know, it might require a lot of politics to get something as silly as that approved.
And as you said, alone the idea that you actually need to go into the App Store while you are on the run is not very great from the experience standpoint.
So there is one key feature that I think would necessitate being on the App Store, and sort of to chime in on your answer to Sabrina's question,
which is the browser, right? You
Sorry?
need to get it, which is the browser.
Well,
you need to get access to PWAs.
That in order for me to go app by default, I would need to have some kind of in-app purchase. Right, so the business would already have to be thinking about having microtransactions or in-app purchases or some kind of in-app licensing going on that's going through the official App Store, paying a fee to the App Store because it is their main distributor and their main enabler. Then I would by default go, you know, as a strategic advisor or as a CTO, or, you know, I usually advise CTOs. I would only consider it when the business has already said that, yes, this is a business requirement.
But I would encounter
monetization on the native platform, right? So we want to chime in on iOS users' app store accounts.
Yeah.
We want to leverage their subscription platform. We want to connect it with some other subscription.
But why don't you do that with a PWA?
No, so that's my point. If there is business reasons for wanting to be on that monetization strategy, where it is more efficient, or let's say more margin efficient to be on the native app store rather than home baking something with Stripe or home baking something with a third-party provider, then it would make complete sense. I wouldn't question going native by default. But that would be my only sort of approach for direct to customer apps, right? So B2C or direct to customer. if it's a productivity tool for businesses and there are 20 users for one paying client, right? So the paying client is a legal entity or a business, and then there's 20 users or 200 or 2,000 users for one paying client. That makes no sense because the user, the consumer of the app has no monetary transaction with the actual business who provides the app. In that case, it's just a typical sort of B2B SaaS service provider. And as you said with Ryan, the users would just expect something to be, workable from a mobile perspective, but not necessarily from the native app store. It can be an app store, but perhaps not the native one. In the case of Android, you also run into like different app stores if that's something you're interested in, but it's not anywhere mainstream.
Yeah. But I would still say that, first of all, when we now take a look at just the Android world, then you can run a PWA and have in-app purchases the same way you have in the store because it's the same API. Actually, just
on the Android, yes. On the iPhone,
yes.
Not.
On the iPhone, this is one of the big things at the moment going on because they start to break this up, but it's not there yet. And on some point, you are already able, as far as I know, to make purchases with a web SDK. But it's not like that they approve it in the way they like we used to have it in the App Store of Apple because they have some control over it. Right?
It doesn't natively integrate into your payment capabilities, right? So you would have to do it through the browser, right? So Apple has this sort of double click, the side button, the quick pay, to have one click payment, right? So that's primarily why e-commerce businesses want to have a native app so that you can go select it in the browser. Volt is on iOS for this reason. You go to Volt, you pick up your food, then when you say pay, you get the Apple Pay button and you sort of double click your pay button on your iPhone and then it just pays. There was no credit card information necessary. The exchange of credit card information also happens in a secure way, at least we would like to hope. And there is a browser equivalent SDK for that, I believe, but it is a little bit more clumsy if it's in a browser.
Let's repeat the session in 12 months and take a look how far we are.
Yeah, in Google Chrome especially, there is a much more sort of browser native approach to Google Pay. Right, so I have a lot of my sort of fake virtual credit cards linked up with PayPal and Google Pay. So I sort of have this experience recreated in a lot of different platforms, but I don't think that's mainstream. I think preferably if there is some kind of in-app purchases going on, or it's just recurring purchases going on, or food purchases going on, or just typical e-commerce going on, you would want to leverage everything you can to get one-click payment into the user's hands, even if that means not having a PWA and having a native app. So that's sort of my contrarian view of like one strong revenue-driven decision to say, okay, we will do everything we can to get one-click payment into the user's hands.
Is this actually a question? Is this a question you wanted to answer, actually?
What do you mean?
Sabrina asked, what characteristics would make you rule out a PWA from the beginning outside the business model? Or outside the business model?
Yeah, so I didn't address the outside the business model. I think I would have to think about that. I don't have anything off the top of my head.
Because if I understand the question, right, it's about technical things, right?
Yeah, so outside the business model, I believe it would assume sharing revenue with the platform provider of the App Store, right? So where you're either paying for access to the iOS store, or, it doesn't have to be a mobile app store. It could be Epic Games. It could be Steam, right? So you can also think about it that way. But generally, for the games industry, you are targeting a native experience. With the exception of a few of the more modern games, which are sort of in-browser experiences, or sort of these sort of long-form incremental games, which are sort of like cookie clicker equivalents of like having an in-browser experience, but they're not very popular because usually you want in-app purchases and one-click purchases for the younger generation without any safety, without any safety protocols, which is how TikTok gets you. So for outside the business model, I mean, that's a great question. outside of the business model. So not for monetary reasons, not for service reasons. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think just pure native graphics acceleration, I think that would be sort of my go-to answer, but I don't have a lot of experience in that field. I did used to work with the development team that has created the Talking Tom. Maybe you know it. It's like a iPhone app, or it's a mobile app on most platforms nowadays. It was based in Slovenia, but it was the most prominent mobile app in the last decade. It was basically a cat that you spoke to, and then he sort of repeated back what you said, and you could play games. It was a entertainment / sort of child learning app game.
I don't know it.
Yeah, it was very popular in Slovenia because it was developed by a Slovenian company that then got acquired, and then sort of they made movies, and then it got into Hollywood, and then it got into the Chinese market, and it was quite prominent. The point is, something like that nowadays you could actually do with the PWA, especially with WebAssembly, and with using sort of graphics acceleration that's available to you in the browser. But you would still have to be targeting a PWA to sort of get rid of the borders, to get rid of the scroll bar, to get rid of the navigation bar. Like that's something that a PWA gives you, that a native app also gives you, but a PWA versus a browser experience, it quickly runs into issues. So if I take a step further and say that kind of native experience, but ruling out a PWA, I think it would just have to come down to either pure performance, latency on the microphone, or latency on the camera, or storage on the device. Keeping in mind that the PWAs do have really a lot of storage space on your device if you enable it. The other thing I can think of is if there's any kind of security protocol going on that you might need a double handshake for use the native protocols for, like enabling Bluetooth or enabling a very precise GPS location. So that's what comes to my mind off the top of my head. But I think
not precise. If you want to have the geolocation is as precise as it is on native. It is like you need to activate things like wake lock, and you need to make sure that you're not in an energy saving mode and all this kind of things. Then you have the same, but you need to know it. Actually, this is what I meant. If you know, in a traditional way of websites, you just take a look at the API and say,
yes, but not in all browsers. Not in Chrome, yes, but in Safari, I think so, but not across the board in all browsers, right? So it might not work on a 2-year-old Microsoft tablet.
Yeah, this is the progressive way. So the idea of progressive web app is that it progressively enhances. So if there's a feature, you leverage it. If there's no feature, you don't use it. So this is actually the idea of that. An apps becomes better and constantly updated over time and can do different things on different devices. That's actually one of the core specifications it was in the very beginning.
Nowadays, the web is absorbing all of these APIs. So you even now have a battery status API on the web in the browser. So even if you're not doing a PWA, you can check, if you get permission from the user, you can check the battery status of the user's device if they're on a mobile device that has a battery. Right? So we have come a long way. Also, apropos coming a long way, jQuery 4 was recently released, and they're actually talking about a lot of these changes where, by looking at the jQuery 4 changelog, you can actually, it's like looking into a time machine. Like you can actually see all the problems that we went through with the web standards. Theo was recently covering them. Not Theo. Primogen was covering the jQuery 4 release, and there were just these concepts of here's the standard as it was, but it wasn't supported. But it kind of made sense to not support it because all the major browsers did the right thing and supported what was sensible, not what was in the standard, and then the standard was changed. but it was not changed in the way that was the majority adopters, and then only IE covered this kind of standard. And there was all these like exceptions for almost every API that you can think of. They were exceptions in the standard, or just the browser vendors just thought, no, the standard is silly. We'll implement it our way, and then Google or Safari or Firefox might sort of lead the charge there, and then the other browsers follow their lead, not following the standard, and then not following the standard becomes the standard. And then libraries like jQuery, which is now at version 4, had polyfills and shims for all those little, like, just the mess of trying to figure out what is the developer in the current year expect this behavior to be, and then provide that cross-platform, right? So, because jQuery was the original PWA library, it was the original PWA framework. It tried to give you the same experience on a browser that have a web interface on all devices, on mobile, on desktop, on every single different browser, and on every single screen size, which is really difficult. And that's why it's still one of the most widely used web technologies, sadly.
And because of WordPress.
And because of WordPress, of course. WordPress is also the most.
So if we manage to get rid of WordPress, we probably get rid of jQuery as well. Just to say that.
My point is, a lot of what was necessary 10 years ago in jQuery is now being removed because they commented, hey, this has since we added this over the decades, this has become standardized, and now it's available natively, right? So I think we can use this lesson from jQuery also in the context of PWAs. A lot of reasons for adopting iOS and Android apps, as Raul mentions, are without any specific valid use case, especially in 2024, because all of those like really strong native capabilities are being standardized into the web standard, into the web APIs, into geolocation, batteries, graphical acceleration, WebAssembly. Right? You can write natively performing code even on a mobile device. You can get access to the camera. You can get access to the different types of the cameras. You can get access to the microphone. You can get access to the speakers. You can get access to So a lot of things that you would just normally assume that the device probably has a web equivalent standard. Now, is it the same as a native? Is it the same SDK as a native? Is it the same sort of micro performance or latency as a native? Hell no. There might be some compromise going on for most of these technologies, but it is available. So if you have no use case, I would definitely say, don't bother with it.
I quickly give you the Fugu tracker. Fugu is a Japanese fish. So it doesn't have anything to do with a fish. It's actually about web capabilities, and probably a very good spot if you're interested into PWAs, because a PWA does incorporate those things. So on this website, you can see where we are. For example, Web Bluetooth. Very interesting technology, and you get the informations where we are at the moment, on which device this is available, in which way, and how far. And of course, I don't know if you have the Can I Use implementation there.
Yes, so Firefox and Safari are negative. So just to be clear, Bluetooth through GATT, that's peer-to-peer Bluetooth on two devices where the Bluetooth receiver is activated through the browser. Just in case that wasn't clear. I did used to develop native apps for exactly this reason. To detect or to send somebody offline, peer-to-peer, from like one warehouse administration tool to the other one without being with offline capability. So splash screen.
Exactly, you have quite a lot. You have requests there. It's just I just wanted to give you this pick, maybe a pick of the day to take a look inside there where we are and how we actually progress in that case as well. And of course, can I use, for example, for file system API, can I use? Let's take a look at can I use. It's not visible. Wait, I need to switch screen. Can I use here, for example, let's take a look at Bluetooth. and we see web Bluetooth here, and there you have it in a more detailed way on
All
which.
across the board, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So for example,
if you need get Bluetooth, definitely native app. To answer Sabrina's question.
we talked about file system API. Let's take a look at this. We have the file system API, which is available, on most browsers. It is, i.e. you can ignore, and that's actually quite good.
IE you can ignore because most Microsoft-driven browsers are Edge.
Let's go quickly through the other comments, and then I want to share my table because I want to this was basically part of the topic of today, to give the audience an idea of what is the real comparison between PWA, Flutter, and React Native.
Okay.
So we have that already. Grant give a good reason, so it's okay.
Okay.
Granted, right?
Granted.
LinkedIn on mobile browsers works great for reading. Commenting and DMs are a pill though.
I don't know. LinkedIn for me, native app browser. LinkedIn in general for me.
I have never used LinkedIn in a browser on mobile. I wasn't.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually no, I wasn't. I need to try actually because
the app is definitely terrible. So it's
it is. It is sometimes, especially let's say I made so many comments in the last days, which were basically disappearing or not going through. One of the two, both things. I wasn't sure if someone really receives my comments or not. And this is actually, I don't know if it's an app problem or an API problem, but it is in reality not very good. Remember when the iPhone launched in 2007, how everything was going to be web-based, and 18 months later they launched the App Store in mid. Yeah, it was actually Steve Jobs who said that the world with the iPhone should be developed in the web, and we should create web apps. Basically, he was very strong on the opinion.
We have gotten there. We are getting very close to that.
Yeah. Some years later, right? And so actually, the Apple refused later on to use or adopt the term PWA. So they just used basically web apps, which is just part of that word. But in reality, it is the same specification. But they found out quickly that the monetization with web isn't that easy than it is with the native app store.
So most of these platforms makes money through they make money through vendor lock-in on the platform. They do provide a good service, or they might provide oversight or governance or some kind of regulation oversight, especially when it comes to underage use or sort of having to sort of lock in or lock out certain demographics or certain countries. That's quite useful, or just getting into the market more easily. So there is some benefit, but they do take a really, really, really strong cut. And you can also see this in the game dev world, with Steam and with the Epic Games platform and the other platforms that are sort of playing the same game. And we even saw it now with with Unity. Unity wanted to adopt a per install fee, where even free apps would have to pay a fee if somebody was using the framework. So there was this idea of imagine if you use jQuery, that you would have to pay 1,000 of a cent every time somebody viewed your website, and then you would have to report usage statistics of your website to the framework holder, to the rights holder of the framework. Like, that would be silly. But that's how music works, for example, right? Every time Spotify plays some song, they need to track how many times it was played so that they can pay royalties to the rights holder, not to the author, not to the artist, to the rights holder, right? Which is usually the publisher, or the exclusive rights holder, which might be leased out to an estate if it's old, or if it's but that's getting into intellectual property and in international law. I don't want to go that route, down that route. The point is they make money through vendor lock-in on the platform. AWS is also prominent for making a lot of money by charging you ridiculous fees for egress, right? So for charging you money for making backups and getting off of the platform.
And I think this is one of the reasons why Telegram is using PWA as a technology, because Telegram was about the non-vendor lock-in thing. Let's say the more private version of WhatsApp actually.
I mean, WhatsApp
And
stopped being private when it got acquired by Meta. by Facebook.
but what I mean is private for you in terms of the user. So there's more
Okay.
privacy in it. And I would say PWA or the web, let's say the web, is open for everyone. So it is your browser and you're connecting in a decentralized way to a centralized server. This is what you do with the browser. And with the app, it's a little different. You stay in one ecosystem. You are within the ecosystem. And with a browser, you are not in an ecosystem. You are with your browser outside of an ecosystem. You connect to an ecosystem for a short amount of time with a tap in your browser. And this is a slight difference, but a significant one, which is the root cause why we still have Apple as the roadblock when it comes to PWAs, and hopefully it will soften. So Sabrina's having a follow-up question. Maybe as a front end, or maybe as front end developers, we should always consider it standard to build a web project like a PWA? Question mark. I would say when you are a web company, of course you should. We had that in the very beginning. The idea of, for example, you are already a native company. You have built Xcode and Kotlin things, and now you should do with two of your teams, let's say TypeScript-driven projects. I don't say JavaScript because I don't like it. TypeScript project. This is then again the discussion from the beginning. It could be hard to switch. So when the question is about greenfield projects, right? You start a new project and suddenly your team should do something different. In this case, the leap is maybe too large to do that. But if your requirements clearly say you need to have the discoverability like Spotify had, you actually need to find ways to do this. So again, it's contextual. When I would say if your team have the skill set or obtain the skill set at some point to create web apps, then yes, you should probably try to default to PWA and go into something when the requirements are actually not fit. This is still the same, like we have answered to the last question regarding that. So we are done with the
Let's do a quick pitch. We haven't done it the last time, so we gotta continue to practice.
Pitching.
So yes, so you have updated your link tree. You very proudly showed me today, Adrian.
Yeah, it's actually the old one. I have a banner even for this. There awesome. It is. So it's actually just a way to find out about my content. I tried to get everything inside what I'm actually doing on one page, and I forgot that I had Linktree. I paid for it, but I forgot it. And actually, this is actually a interesting thing if you want to know about the OTJ content, the Snackable CTO blog, LinkedIn stuff, mentor crews, CTO fellowship, which we do for entire organizations and help them to get along in the entire vertical. Take a look at this. This is the link. Just Linktree, and then go to my first and last name, and then you will get the overview in the fresh design of Snackable CTO.
Awesome.
That's it. So yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, and then you'll find all my major links. So that my major links are primarily crafting tech teams, and by extension, our tech journey. My one-on-one mentoring on mentor crews, and my team-based mentoring, which will require a conversation with me. So there's a Calendly on my profile that you can find on my LinkedIn. What I do is essentially I'm a life coach who also has a very, very strong technology background. So I sort of put myself in the middle of the compiler and the human problems, and sort of try to connect engineering teams with their business counterparts. That's what I'm doing. I'm very passionate about solving hard human problems while also helping teams improve their craftsmanship ability. So I'm a nerd for test-driven development and continuous delivery, while also super invested into personal development and leadership skills and communication skills. So if you're finding you would like to upgrade that, let's say the level of well-being and the level of craftsmanship in your teams, and if you're managing to be, if you find it difficult to be on time with your projects, then give me a call and let's see if we can figure something out.
I really want to speak out for Dennis because Dennis is a person who's challenging me, and this is the reason why I'm actually streaming together with him. Is one of those reasons. I said once in very it's quite a while ago, but I was talking about mentoring and having a buddy, and you should have one of those or better both, and I have both, and Dennis for me is one of my two buddies I have. So buddies for me in tech are people I talk to on a very regular basis, and they need to challenge me. People who can actually challenge my opinions. So as I said, I have two types of opinions where I'm aware of my personal one, which is an amateur opinion, and my professional opinion when I'm thinking about being CTO or engineering lead or mentor in this case. And he helps me to challenge those both, so that I can orientate or navigate my journey, actually, making my decisions better. And during the time when we both streamed together, I learned quite a lot just because of talking to him. And this is quite interesting. So I don't find a lot of people who can do that in all the fields I am in as well. So I am very broad in what I've done. So I've done that stuff for more than 24 years. I have a lot of experience in front end, in back end, in architecture, in cloud, in infrastructure, IIS service. Just take a topic. Most of the times I can talk about those things because I had, on one way or another, problems with those things. I needed to, solve problems in that case. And Dennis somehow is able to talk about most of those things, or even all of them, just with me in a discussion. And that's actually quite valuable. So I am lucky I don't need to pay anything for that. I just need to sit down with him on Thursday and talk with him 2 hours, and then he's fine. But you can have the same just by picking him as your coach. You should do that. That's actually a great pick. Proved by me. I say it's valuable, and I really appreciate that. Being mentored and having a buddy is extremely important for you to reflect yourself and don't fall into the trap of being an imposter syndrome guy or a Dunning-Kruger person. To find a balance for you, to be in between and understand things from strategic, tactical, and operational layer, this person is your man. Thanks. Good.
I appreciate you for that very kind characterization. Like that's very heartfelt, and I really appreciate that. I do have to mention that it's not a one-way street. Like, Adrian helps me a lot. What surprised me about you, Adrian, is that you're a systems automation nut. Like, and I really appreciate that. Like the amount of work that you put into systematizing and your Notion, and the ways in which you use AI, and the way you sort of do networking first, I notice very prominently. Like, you connect immediately with people who can solve a problem for you rather than so that really speaks volumes of your sort of experience as CTO. That really stood out for me, and I'm taking a lot of notes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good. Now we have touched each other's shoulder. We can go on with the stuff. So a little comparison table. It's actually a little, but I've worked on that quite a while. And I'm not 100% sure about this, to be honest. It is just, so it is not based on, let's say, something I copied. It is just something I built for myself over the last years. And this is the result of that. So in all my documents I assembled together, I just took a look in the last weeks, and I worked on that as basically a cheat sheet for my team and my people, stakeholders, to make the right decision. Sometimes I use it in mentorings as well. And I want to have your opinion, Dennis, and audience, about that. And I will go through it, and feel free to toss us questions. And I will just say what I'm thinking when we compare PWA, Flutter, and React Native. So I can go a little closer than we should be able. Exactly. Context, always important. I'm always about context. I hate it to have no context, because it is actually wrong then. Comparison based on our findings and research to identify the most suitable technology for small to medium-sized businesses and startups. So it is not about enterprises and large, medium-sized companies. We're talking about teams let's say something up to 20 developers in an organization. This is where we're talking about. Okay.
On the topic of enterprises, a little announcement. Perhaps not a surprise to anybody, but we are doing test-driven development for the entirety of February on our Thursday tracks. And one of those Thursday tracks on TDD, test-driven development, will be TDD with React in the context of an enterprise application, because I am talking with Nick Shumeko, who is, I think, the #1 expert in Europe to sort of talk about enterprise-grade React applications built with TDD. And we are coordinating which Thursday he can come on and perhaps even code on stage and sort of talk about his experience managing a large-scale banking application specifically. He works in banking, and he built a George. And he has a lot of experience for enterprise-grade React. So if you're interested in that, definitely subscribe to our Tech Journey circle community. And
it's actually on my LinkedIn tree.
And it's on his LinkedIn tree as well. It's also on my profile links, and it's it's scrolling down below on the video right now if you're watching. Yeah. So if you're just interested in that aspect of it, or React with TDD, or enterprise level React, or what that looks like, keep an eye out for that future episode. I think it's 99% definitely happening. I will let you know as soon as I know which date Nick confirms for. And now let's go back to small, medium businesses and startups.
Good. So we have 4 columns, the aspect, PWA, Flutter, and React Native. And so starting with the developer availability. And this is actually a strategic point when you are in the vertical. So deciding if you have enough developers for your journey into, let's say, the future, like 5 to 10 years, which is the normal life cycle for an application until it actually gets legacy. You need to have enough developers and be resilient to fluctuations in your team. And when we take a look at web is an endless resource of people you can have there. React Native as well, because it's so much influenced by the React stuff of the web. So you can basically switch developers in those 2 areas, which is the reason why both are defined by myself as high, while Flutter is a more specific type of thing. It's like a little bit like Dart. Actually, it's Dart. It's a little bit like Go and all the other things. It is some newer thing, which is actually some form of hype, but yet it is more like a closed young ecosystem. Let's call it a young ecosystem.
It is closer to the native compiled C level of languages, which makes it a little bit more of a web friendly compromise for engineers who are coming from Java, who are coming from Kotlin, who are coming from C, C++, C#. So Flutter really rubs that itch, scratches that itch, for the more sort of non-web technologies. Engineering studios, I would say. A lot of developers I know, they either do C++ and a little bit of one of the web technologies. And nowadays with Go and the Rust, that's sort of starting to really blur, because Go has become a very, very friendly, web-friendly C native language, which is unexpected. I didn't expect Go to be so popular for the web. So that Flutter is definitely in that camp, and I think that's also why it's such an outlier. But at the same time, Objective-C is also somewhat exotic, I would say. You know, if you're in iOS development or macOS development, Objective-C is definitely a unexpected specialization in your craft. Like you're really locking in to a very specific language, to a very specific. There is nothing in Objective-C that you will write that is not written on that specific framework for that specific OS. I don't think anybody uses Objective-C for anything else.
Let's stick with topic because we don't have that much time anymore. So ease of development. I came to the conclusion that especially when you are in the area of cross-platform and availability of documentation and let's say development tools, you are definitely in a better area when you stay with, let's say, market giants like React or let's say just native web things as well. Mm-hmm. And in both areas, you have, because of the ecosystem, you have, let's say, more availability in when it comes to good development tools, good documentations. Especially React, when you take like the React Native, it gone through several life cycles already and doesn't have the problems of its own childhood anymore. And this is basically one of those things. So Flutter does have a good future, but React Native and PWAs are already in the future. And PWAs is a synonym, of course, for web in general. Performance in general, and here we have already something which goes into another directions. Flutter, on the other hand, is which comes most closest to what is actually native, because it's actually native in the end. React Native does very similar, but not as good as Flutter, as what I saw from benchmarks. PWA, and we maybe have enough time to show that, is good, but not as good as direct native things, especially if you don't have WebAssemblies available. Performance, for example, when you go for image processing, is just adequate when you go on PWAs, while it's still excellent and very good on the other sides.
So we're talking about on app, like on device.
On device. So, for example, if you want to do image processing, I will show that in a demo app after that one, where we really downsample a several megabytes large image on the device into your space and take a look how it actually performs. And so we have the availability, which is the platform support, is definitely, the web is by far the largest availability. So you have so much stuff on the web to actually deploy. So dev and ops, you have so many things you can do with those things in the web. That's actually the excellent pick. So none of the others can keep up with that. Right?
Even to the extent of now having in-cloud development environments, right? So you can even have your IDE running in the cloud, where for example, for a lot of the iOS development and Android development or Microsoft development, you would need to buy a dedicated machine for every X amount of developers just to have an iOS device that can compile or that can sign published releases to the App Store.
Yep. Coming to the very interesting point for me is continuous delivery and updates. So when you have the web and the service worker, you just push an update, and then you can make, we can see that maybe today as well. I showed that in the screenshot. You have the service worker, which does have an update prepared. It's a little bit like a new Docker instance on the next side, and as soon as you switch, it basically switches out the other one. And this is what you can do basically on the fly. You can do that with an update, with a pop-up, but it's fluently. So you don't need to make an app store update. And this is actually something, on the other hand, which is still okay to do that. So I don't make that red or orange or something like that. But still, you need to handle updates as a user yourself. So updates needs to be approved by app stores. Updates needs to be handled. And this is something, in my personal opinion, not adequate anymore for 2024. In my opinion, updates should be instantly. And for the continuous delivery practice, it is way better to just be able to push out an update and get direct feedback than going through this awkward cycle of getting approved with your new version. Cost effectiveness is, I think we've discussed it quite a lot, is extremely high. I discussed it in the beginning as well, because you just start to build, you have a great ecosystem, many developers where you can start with, just develop your stuff and it's available everywhere. Period. So on the other platforms, you can do that as well, but it's a little bit more complicated to find the people who are able to do that. And then you are on 100% cross-platform. You need to make more touches, for example, to go into an area where we have high discoverability in Google, for example, which is, I think, in Flutter. I forgot. In one of them, it's actually not really possible. In the other, it is a little bit, but you have more overhead, more maintainability, more maintenance to actually do that. And in the web, you just have that. Period. So it's actually more cost effective than the other solutions when we are still in the context of small businesses. Of course, it's a different thing if you have large business models and you have, let's say, the development costs are actually not a factor anymore. Then it's differently, So alignment with mobile first requirements. Of course, the web is okay there, but it's not as good as the other things. So they are both excellent because they were made for me being mobile or natively mobile appearance. The framework is made for that. The UI is made. So basically, both have UI frameworks in it. And for example, on this side, you need to have something like Ionic framework to help you with that. But it is not as the other sides are. Actually,
for someone that's just jumping in the middle of the explanation, the columns are left to right, PWA, Flutter, and React Native.
Okay, so let's get back to business though. So alignment with desktop first requirement. And there we are actually in a space where the PWA is very good because it is in this middle ground. So you can basically do everything with the PWA. And it is pretty much the same with React Native. So if you want to have something which is running on the desktop very well, you can have both worlds, actually. So I think it was Gmail. I'm not sure, but I think Gmail is using... No, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong now. I don't want to say anything wrong. And Flutter is good as well, but it's simply not made for desktop first applications. It's made for mobile applications primarily. So you can use every of them, but you have more touches to do on the other frameworks. And there might be, if someone in the audience is more into that specific topic, please help us there, because this is not based on deep knowledge. This is just an observation I made by doing researches. I know that because of PWA, but the other ones, please help us if you have something for us where we can update this one. Skill alignment with TypeScript. And the point is, there is a huge movement in TypeScript. This is basically a little bit on the ecosystem.
And tooling and ecosystem and backing by large companies, in this case, Microsoft and Meta.
So it's a little bit unfair to actually ask that. So of course it is not, because it is not made for TypeScript, but it's excellent on both sides. But if you already have a company which incorporates in some form or includes some form the TypeScript as a requirement or a skill set, then it might make sense to just jump. Let's say you have the PWA, but you want to have a native experience, then it does make sense to switch between React Native and PWA, for example, with React and React. Then you have both the same world, but you can't do that with Flutter. It's very different from the other.
That said, backend engineers working in Node.js on TypeScript and React developers, they are a different breed of engineer. Like, we have to make that distinction in that a lot of front-end engineers don't make very good back-end engineers, and a lot of back-end engineers don't make very good sort of component architects and designers, right? So I would like to differentiate that, like that the back-end to front-end differentiation is still extremely strong in our industry. It's diminishing now with the advent of full-stack developers who but that's usually just front-end developers who understand the back-end much better than the regular front-end developer. But it's still not universally just TypeScript. Like, the frameworks play a very key role. And the execution environment, Node.js versus React components with JSX, it plays a key role in what the skill actually means. It's not just the language. I mean, people are just born one way or another, right? Like, I didn't choose to be a backend developer. It just made sense to me, Like, I find it
Okay.
very difficult.
I just wanted to say I have a very hard break today. I really need to go on a phone call right after.
Okay.
In actually 12 minutes. So I wanted to quickly finish that one. Scalability. Scalability is not about like we know it from microservices or something like that. It is more about how you scale the features of your application over time, which means that there is something. I was willing to do that all green, in the same way, because actually you don't have that problem in PWAs. But in reality, the variety in the browser space is still not as good as it should be. There's more friction, more, let's say, inconsistency still, and you don't have that in the Flutter or in the React native environment.
The potential is there, but it's a little bit clumsy.
Yeah, so and especially it is a little bit more complicated in a large scaled application to keep the performance as good as it was in the beginning, and this is more easy to accomplish with the more native approaches.
Lower performance introduced by scale.
Yeah, more things to load and all this kind of stuff. It is possible, but it requires more maintainability. You need to dig more. You need to optimize more, which makes it still a good option. So it's not a game changer or a game breaker, but it is definitely something we need to consider in that case as a more negative point than the others are actually. But it's still not a per se negative point, right? So community support and resources, it's definitely extensive. It is on again React side and growing under Flutter. So all are good, but Flutter is still a little bit behind, which means that in Flutter you have Flutter. There is not much of a support around the community itself, and the web community and the React Native community is heavily influenced by other communities as well. So this is a little difference there. Cross-platform consistency is definitely excellent on Flutter, so Flutter really shines there. It is by far the one you build something and it transpiles into the others, and it's a little different on the other platforms. It's still good on React Native, but on the web, as I said, another browser, another day. It's still like I had it yesterday. We created a list and it was differently scaling on the Safari browsers and on the Chrome versions.
With React Native, you still have to compile a binary, sign it, and publish it to the App Store, right? So you don't really get around that hurdle that you sort of can get for free from a PWA.
Integration with existing systems. So this is about when you have already things out there and you want to integrate your application, it is very easily done with a web application, for example. So if you have something out there like SAP Ariba, which is in the business to business area, it is a huge thing at the moment, and it's very easy to integrate web applications there. It's quite hard to do that with native apps. And so it is always easy to integrate web. And with React Native, since you can do it in some form of more React, it is still viable, but it is a little bit more complicated to do that with Flutter. So give us feedback there if you have something to add to this as well. The learning curve for new developers is quite low for React. For the React versions, because let's say first of all there is already a lot of React and it is quite easy to learn, even if it's hard to master. But it's easy to get into and build something.
And the documentation is of extremely high quality for the React ecosystem. It's one of the best ecosystems. It really mirrors the let's say the highest quality of like masterclass level that you can get in a documentation, in a framework, in a native ecosystem without that is free, without having to sort of pay a lot of money with, like the jQuery documentation in 2016 was meh, and you sort of had to go explore, experiment, and then learn from other engineers to really figure out what to do.
Exactly, and potential for code reuse is actually quite high.
How come you put React Native as moderate compared to Flutter?
I'm not sure if this is mixed. I'm not sure why I have done this. I was thinking the same right now, so maybe I've made a mistake.
This is so far the only unintuitive part that I've noticed.
Yeah, me too at the moment. I'm not sure if
Okay.
this is just a mistake. So maybe it's just a mistake. So excuse me for that one. So native device features and accessibility. Yeah, definitely orange on PWA. It's good, but it's growing, but it's not. No, it is not close to what we see on the other devices. We saw that in the Matrix, with the others were quite high, and this one is somewhere above the middle ground, but it's not there yet. Even with WebAssemblies, you still don't have all the capabilities you would have in the other areas, especially not as easily available. So they are basically very close connected, and in the browser you need to do things in order to get to that point. Okay, then long-term viability, very good on the PWA side because the web won't stop growing. It will only get better. Flutter is still a close ecosystem, while React Native is a more open ecosystem due to the idea of React, which is closely related to the web. This is the reason why I've put it like that. Time to market, by no question, excellent on the website. It is the fastest way to create, especially cross-platform. And we talked about cross-platform, so there's simply nothing which comes close to a PWA. And the others are simply just moderate, because you need to do quite a lot to actually have a good experience, especially when you go. So, for example, you need to create a desktop application as a web app as well, transpile it from Flutter or React Native into that one. You will probably have a hard time, and it's maybe even should be orange. Maybe I have color problems here. I need to fix that as well. In my opinion, it's not very good. So when it comes to cross-platform, a big USP for the web. Customizability, UI, and flexibility all are high. Actually, all of them can do great here. So you can do everything regarding UI and flexibility
They
with all of
meet
them.
or exceed industry standards.
Yeah, exactly.
No question.
Discoverability, excellent. We talked about that. It is so extremely easy to find a web app. Especially, you can search for it, you can link it, you can reuse it anywhere, and you can... it's not only that you can discover it by know about that, but get that as well. So it is like you discovered it, you have it. And
yeah.
Exactly. And they have multiple steps in the other area as well, especially because React Native is very bad when it comes to SEO. It's even worse than Flutter is. Same with SEO is actually one of the very similar related things. Security is good in all of them, but I don't tend to say, I don't want to have it in an excellent way, because I don't think we should think like that. We should always degrade ourselves a little bit and say, maybe it's not secure enough, because security is a matter of concern. We should be concerned about that. But in reality, there is not a big difference between those, especially since we have in a PWA, by definition, HTTPS. If it's not HTTPS, it's not a PWA. SMB requirements, extremely cost effective, easy to start. The others are good as well, so they are good picks to start, but you need to consider that if you really have lower requirements, you'll probably do a little bit of overhead here, and you miss some points like the ecosystem and stuff like that, which makes this the better pick, in my opinion. Enterprise requirements, and here we have a little vice versa. Enterprise is a lot about scalability and performance, because they have the money. They don't require too much about cost effectiveness. So it is...
There are very few cloud services or just services in general where, as an enterprise, you could throw money at a problem and sort of solve your PWA needs.
Yeah.
Whereas with the other services, it's a little bit more accessible.
So 1 minute per... No, not even. So adoption. PWA... The web is quite adopted, right? PWA, not yet. So maybe I should have splitted that a little bit. React Native is extremely adopted. So everyone who's talking these days about native app is most likely going into React Native area. And Flutter is just growing at the moment. It's good. And it's definitely, there are other options as well, but there is a reason why we're talking about those three, and Flutter is one of them. The update cycle, we talked actually already about this in the other part, is just best on PWA. Cost efficiency, full front end. So you only, full front end means the entire palette of things, like a desktop app, a native version, a mobile version, and, for example, a version where you can install on some. So basically 4 different versions, including the administrative part for the admins, moderators, or people behind that. So not the end users, but the actual clients. Definitely PWA, because you can do that all in one application. Just one application can handle all these things. This is great. And this is not easily done by the others. It needs to be, they need to upgrade and update their ecosystem in order to keep up with what PWA already can do there, especially with tools like Electron or something like that. Cost efficiency, this was this one, moderate. Sorry, I was in the wrong line. Cost efficiency in mobile app only. This is a difference. So you definitely only want to go in the app stores. You want to have the payment model there. You can do that these days with Ionic Framework and stuff like that, but it's simply not as good as the other ones. And it is from moderate to excellent. It's moderate plus, which is the reason why it's green. So it's getting better. So I'm very hopeful about this point, but it's not as good as the others, period. So if you only have a mobile app to build, probably it's easier to pick one of them, especially on the right-hand side, because React and the ecosystem and stuff like that would be my pick to go with React Native, but not with Flutter. This is just my thing. And there I have some examples. My problem is I really have to go in 1 minute. And you can keep on if you like. We have...
you can do the demo next time, because you have an
we do it next time. We have one more session about this. I have an app to show, right?
It deserves more than a few minutes. So let's do the demo next time.
You can even scroll out to a planet. It's quite cool to see, actually. Maybe I can update a little bit.
I already seen it, so
I've updated it since then a little bit. So
okay.
I actually prepared it. I'm pretty sad that I can't show it right now. I can't go over time.
Too much. It's too much for one episode.
I really need to go now. Okay, thank you very much. Then I put my stage off.
I'll finish up the stream.
Bye-bye, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. So that was our pretty much deep dive into PWAs and our comparison with Flutter and React. I did check a little bit while Adrian was talking regarding the popularity of Flutter, and it seems as far as the developer circles are concerned, because I also checked the Stack Overflow developer survey from 2023. I mean, the one that was done for the year at the beginning of 2024. So Flutter is definitely gaining traction, and there seems to be a much stronger hype as it being the underdog for adoption. So I think the amount of the recent downloads and the amount of recent new projects in Flutter outweigh those in React Native. But React Native is still, by virtue of being sort of cognizant and sort of attached to the whole React ecosystem, still has a quite dominant market stance. So that's something I noticed, is that we are a little bit biased here because we know React and Angular and we know PWAs. We don't know Flutter as much, but I think just from glancing and doing some very quick research, I would say Flutter is much more popular than we give it credit for, at least than what we gave it credit for on this episode. I might be wrong. I would love to hear your opinion on this. Also had Istvan joining. Istvan, hello. I just joined, but this comparison is very helpful. Thanks. I'll definitely watch the entire session from the beginning. Thank you. Thanks for making the time of joining, even if it's last minute. It's great to have you live. And Sabrina, thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us live and for joining us live regularly. I will wrap up the stream now with a few clips that Adrian has prepared. If you've seen them before, they're mostly from our past episodes. Tomorrow is a stream where we kick off. Okay, so for some context, we've wrapped up extreme programming as I was doing a software engineering fundamentals series on my blog. And accompanying the software engineering fundamentals, I was doing streams that were adjacent to the most popular topics from those areas. And we've wrapped up with extreme programming. And on extreme programming, I did a poll that got a lot of attention. And I asked people what their sort of most used, most sort of targeted extreme programming disciplines are that they would like to hear more about. And it was basically TDD, pairing, /ensembling, /mob programming, and continuous integration / continuous delivery / trunk-based development. So I decided to really just give full focus to each one of those 3 topics. So probably February is definitely going to be TDD focused. So we're doing a lot of TDD beginning tomorrow. And then after that, I think we're having another DevOps, platform engineering focus on in March. And then we'll figure out what to do in April, because I think on the Thursday tracks, we'll be doing like 1 key topic per month, just to cover like these key areas and to really cover and really reiterate the basics well, so you can kick off 2024 with a bang. And if you're really interested in doing some kind of changes in your organization, or you're just looking to sort of improve your own personal skills and share them with your team, we got you covered. If there's anything that you're super interested in, and the topics that I just mentioned, do let us know. We have a community now where you can talk to us directly off stream, in between streams, but we're also DM friendly. If you reach out to us on LinkedIn, very happy to have a conversation with you. So tomorrow is about TDD, the modern fundamentals for TDD. Right? So TDD is a old, let's say decades old practice that was sort of rediscovered, but it really ranges back into the 1980s and 1990s. And our tooling and our systems and our habits, especially now with AI-assisted coding, have changed significantly in the past decade. So tomorrow is sort of looking at how a modern practitioner would do TDD without doing those like weird, traditional, by the book, like old-fashioned stuff, and how, and maybe you can find some contrast there. Maybe you are, and maybe you are an old, veteran in the TDD space, and you might learn something new. Or if you're in the younger generation and you want to share your experience with even things that I might not have heard of, definitely mention them on tomorrow's episode. You can even comment on it now on Circle or on the LinkedIn event, so that we can sort of prep for it if you have something very insightful to share on how you're doing TDD in a modern way. That's it from me. I'll roll the clip now, and then in a few minutes, I'll take the stream offline. Thank you so much for being with us live, and hopefully I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much.
There's 2 kinds of one thing. Number one, there's the engineering feedback, right?
Okay.
I'm going to deliver this change today to find out if it breaks it. And then there's the business feedback. I'm going to deliver the smallest slice of this next feature to find out if it's valuable and deliver that and get feedback. But
figure out if it's safe to merge and whether it's safe to continue with these requirements.
Yeah.
That's all.
Just because it passes all the tests doesn't mean that it doesn't break something in production once it finally gets to a production environment. I try to have a high level of confidence, but we're never 100% sure.
Yeah.
And so we want to get feedback as rapidly as possible in the engineering thing. People tell me there's no value in delivering anything until it's feature complete. No. I know it's stable. I want to make sure we're on the right track. I don't want to invest too much money in this idea. I don't want to assume my idea is correct. I want to assume my idea is incorrect. It's a scientific experiment. I'm trying to invalidate the hypothesis. And we should be ecstatic when it's successful and just accept when it's not. Mm-hmm. And then how do we change course to chase the value instead of just assuming value?
I would like to add something to the term of confidence. I think confidence doesn't mean that you are 100%, as you said, 100% safe to deploy. It's about to be confident that you can handle a situation even if something happened, but you expect feedback. So what you definitely get is feedback. And if the feedback is a negative, you can react quickly on that. So this is confidence. It's not about, oh, I'm 100% sure that nothing will happen. I think this is a big misconception.
No, I agree. And people focus on the wrong thing. I want to make sure that everything is perfect before we deliver. That's the wrong thing.